This video is brought to you by Babbel. Learn a new language through real-life conversations. A diminutive but darling painting by the artist William Beck of a woman carrying water from a river. It is beautiful, or it will be, once the myriad of issues are addressed. It is very, very dirty, and it has 2 tears right in the canvas. On top of all of that, the artist was very, very frugal when he painted the painting, and used a piece of canvas that, just barely fits onto the stretcher. And that will need to be resolved along with the other issues if we plan on ensuring that this painting has a long life. Now, there is a beautiful synergy in the fact that William Beck painted a woman carrying water, she doing the heavy lifting. And I, as the conservator, will be doing the heavy lifting in the conservation of this painting, not only for the artist, but for the viewer and the woman carrying water as well. So where do we begin? Well, this painting does not need a massive amount of work, but that doesn't mean that we can't just skip ahead to the end. We still have to address it step by step, piece by piece. And the first thing that I'm going to be doing is taking a consolidation medium. This is a very thin adhesive designed to penetrate into little crevices, and painting it around those loose areas of paint where the punctures are so that they don't flake off or otherwise become detached as I'm handling the painting. Now, if this were a really large painting with a lot of flaking, I might face it, but in this case, it's just not necessary, and subjecting the painting to unnecessary work is something that, well, it's unnecessary, and so I won't do it. Removing this painting from its stretcher is relatively easy. It doesn't look like it's ever been taken off, and the original tacks are fine. They're not rusted or glued down or anything like that. That's one of the benefits of having a painting that has never been conserved before, is there's really nothing to undo. You're starting with pretty much a blank canvas. I know, but you don't have to spend a lot of time reversing somebody else's poor decisions. I'm going to remove all of the accumulated surface grime and particulate from the back of the painting, and this is just stuff that settles in between the stretcher bar and the canvas, and I want to get it off so that when I take the painting over to the hot table, which is the next step, it doesn't gum up the works, so to speak. I don't want to embed any of this in the canvas, and if there's a thick buildup, it will create a bulge or protrusion on the front of the canvas when I lay the painting down on the blotter paper and do the treatment. Now, this treatment is going to do 2 things. One, it's going to remove the waves and the ripples and the stretcher bar marks, but it's also going to help relax the areas of puncture where the canvas has distorted. The hot table is effectively a giant inverted iron. It's a piece of aluminum with heating elements underneath and a vacuum pump attached, and it allows me to expose the painting to heat and pressure and moisture if necessary through a dampened blotter. I can adjust the amount of pressure, adjust the amount of heat, I can adjust the ramp rate, I can do all sorts of adjustments per the painting. And then once the painting is on the hot table, I can work it to make sure that those cracks and creases and distortions are flattened. The painting will then be allowed to cool. I'll turn off the vacuum pump and I'll transfer it over to the drying table. Now, I have long considered building an active pressure table that would effectively clamp down on paintings, but ultimately it's not really worth the effort. This does fine, and for paintings that need to sit for several days, it seems ridiculous to have a machine that could fail and jeopardize the painting. Once the painting has had enough time to rest underneath those weights, I can remove it, transfer it to the front half of the studio, and set up for the structural repairs. Now, for this painting, because the tear is small, and because we didn't lose any canvas, and because there's no other work that needs to be removed, I'm doing a procedure called reweaving. Now, there are many techniques for repairing a tear. One could use a patch, one could use a bridging technique, one could just slather a whole bunch of white lead paint on the back, don't do that, or one could reweave. But reweaving is predicated on having a really good and clean tear with a lot of canvas fibers still remaining. And reweaving is exactly what it sounds like. I am reweaving this long strand of canvas into the short strands, over and under, manipulating each piece of the warp and weft so that I can rebuild the canvas grain or the structure. And when done correctly, this is a really, really strong, high-fidelity repair. It will last a long time. It looks really lightweight. There's not anything added to the back of the canvas. And it is the closest thing to getting the canvas back to a pre-torn state. Once I have manipulated the fibers to my satisfaction, I can add some adhesive. And the adhesive is what's going to make sure that everything stays flat and stays together. It's going to bond all of those little canvas fibers back together and make sure that this really is strong. After applying the adhesive, I'll apply a piece of silicone release film and a piece of felt to cushion it, and then I'll put a weight on. After a couple of hours, I'll come back and I will check on the work, and I will remove the silicone release film if it's ready and simply put the felt back on. This allows the adhesive to really begin the drying process. And while I'm waiting, I can take this opportunity to catch up on my French, because my travels are rapidly approaching and I have little time to waste. And this ease of learning is made possible with Babbel. I can refresh my rusty French wherever I am with Babbel's easy-to-use, self-guided lessons. I decide the pace, the frequency, and design my learning structure to suit what fits me. Babbel takes all the difficulty out of learning a new language. And I can do this while doing really boring, mundane things or really, really important things, thus maximizing my learning time. And it's not all lessons. Babbel has magazines and podcasts to help you learn your language in a way that makes it more exciting and natural to you. So when you're ready to prepare for that vacation, connect with loved ones, or just challenge yourself, click the link in the description or scan the QR code to get 60% off your Babbel subscription.
C'est très facile.
Now that I've done my homework, I can return to my real work, which in this case is the cleaning of this painting. I made some tests earlier on when I took the painting in, and I determined that there was no varnish on this piece. This is just a lot of soot and dirt and grime and all sorts of stuff on the surface of the painting. So I'm using a neutral organic soap, and this is neutral, pH neutral. It is organic, and it is going to break down the accumulated surface grime. I'm using a bristle brush to agitate the soap because it helps speed up the process and also get into some of those little nooks and crannies in the impasto, and that's the textural buildup of the paint. It's not always necessary, but sometimes it is. And sometimes the surface grime that's on the surface is tenacious. And without agitating it, I would need to apply successive rounds of the neutral organic soap, which, is kind of unnecessary. It's wasteful. And if I can get it off in one shot just by agitating it, and the agitation is safe for the painting, there really isn't any reason not to do that. I'll work in small sections, mostly because it allows me to keep a control over what I'm doing. I'm not terribly concerned about this painting being fugitive or any of the paint being vulnerable to this soap because I have made tests, and this is a fairly straightforward painting. There are no glazes, there are no mixed medias. It is just oil paint on canvas. And the artist was fairly well-trained academically, and so he was building paintings in a way that they last. I can't say that for all paintings, and sometimes the painting itself is so tenuously created that even trying to clean it is impossible. But in this case, with a traditionally made painting, it's really fairly straightforward. I can continue on applying the soap, agitating it with the bristle brush, and then coming back with my swab rolled on a little piece of wood and just lift off all of that soap. Now, I will come back after I have done the cleaning, if necessary, and do a second pass or some touch-ups in some of the areas that I didn't quite get with the first pass, and I will remove all of the residue with a solvent that is safe for the painting, but will remove all of what I don't get with the swab. It's important that I clean up after myself, because anything that I leave on the painting will become problematic in the next steps. But as you can see, it's really wonderful to see what's underneath this painting. Yes, we can imagine and we can see some of the colors. Obviously, those big purple clouds are pretty easy to see. But the delicate colors, the really nuanced stuff, well, it just gets flattened. It completely disappears. And we can't see what the artist wanted us to see. But as I remove all of this grime, well, a sky that looked kind of green-gray really isn't. It turns out to be full of pinks and yellows and light greens and creams and a whole range of colors that make it more dynamic, make it more interesting, and make it a full and complete painting. It also makes it the artist's painting. We get to see what he wanted us to see, and that's really the whole point of any painting, is to enjoy the artist's skill and their vision. It is tempting when working on a painting and having to rely on little swabs to grab a whole handful of cotton balls, a big brush, cover the entire painting with the neutral organic soap, and just scrub it clean. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. We have to be careful, we have to be meticulous, and we have to go slowly. And case in point, working in and around a signature area, we want to make sure that we are taking as much precaution as possible, because oftentimes signatures are painted a little different. They're not as dense. Maybe the paint is thinned out, and so they take a little bit more care to clean without removing them. But if one's careful, everything goes according to plan. William Beck, like most artists, was probably very frugal and used every piece of canvas that he had, including this one, which was just big enough to fit onto the stretcher. But I'm not going to trust that it's going to hold without a little bit of support. So on these two really short sides, I'm going to be doing a strip lining. I'm going to be adding a little bit of canvas, a 3-inch wide strip of Belgian linen that's been frayed at the ends to facilitate a smoother transition into the field of the painting and better adhesion because there's more surface area. I'm going to cut off all of the excess, these little frays, because they'll get in the way. And then I'll repeat the same procedure on the opposite side. But on the two sides that are long enough, I'm not going to do a strip lining. It's unnecessary. I'm just going to do a reinforcement. So by ironing on a piece of thermoplastic adhesive film and then ironing on a piece of silk organza, I can add a little bit of fidelity to this tacking edge without adding a whole bunch of material and doing more work than is necessary. Once that's done and dry, I can begin the process of stretching the painting back onto its original support. This is a very small support. It did not need any repairs. There was no damage to it, and it's fairly easy to center the painting on the support, figure out where the tacks need to go, and then start putting it all together. The stretching process is relatively simple. And I prefer to use tacks because I find that they provide better support than staples. They are a little bit slower than staples, and in some cases, slow is actually what you want. You don't necessarily need to rush through this work. You want to make sure you have good work, not fast work, if it means the work isn't good. And also because tacks create one hole in the canvas, where staples create two holes and a pressure point on the canvas where the bar connects those two shafts. And I have found in many years of working on paintings that staples do more damage than they do help. And so I stick with tacks. Once I'm done stretching this painting, I will start trimming up the excess canvas, and I'll fold the corners under, tack them in place, and just kind of try to make the whole back look deliberate and nice. It looks tidy, but it's also a demonstration of care that goes into every aspect. Where the original keys are salvageable, in this case there are 4 of them, I will drill holes in them, and where I need to replace them, I will, and I will drill holes in those too. The holes are necessary to bind these keys into place. Oftentimes, during the movement of the wood, the keys will become loose, and they will fall out and be lost, or they will fall in between the stretcher and the canvas, and then create a bulge that then needs to be addressed. But by putting them in and binding them in place with a little piece of fishing line, I can make sure that if they become loose, they won't fall out. This not only keeps the keys with the support, but it also helps protect the painting long term. We're not going to have any bulges that need to be addressed by a conservator in the future. With the painting put back together and structurally sound, I can now turn my attention to the aesthetics, and this is retouching. But of course, there was paint loss. When the canvas was torn, some paint flaked off, and I simply can't add paint without filling in these losses, because the paint won't have anything to stick to. It doesn't really bond to raw canvas, and under a raking light, or really any light, you'll see the textural difference, and that will betray all of the work that I've done. So using a chalk-based fill-in medium and a little palette knife, I will just fill in this gap, and then I'll start to remove the excess with the palette knife. After a little bit of time allowing it to dry up a little bit, I'll come back and just start removing the excess. I don't want any of the overfill to remain on the painting. That would be problematic because it would require me to then retouch over it. And I only want to add paint where the paint is missing. So I will remove all of this excess fill-in. And it's not terribly difficult. A couple of wet swabs, sometimes I need solvent, sometimes just water, will remove all of this excess. And then, once it's all removed, we can start the retouching process. For this painting, because it is relatively easy to retouch, it is relatively small, I don't need an isolation layer. The paint is stable against the solvents that I use during retouching, and the colors don't need to be saturated up like some really dark colors or glazes to assist in the retouching process. Here, I can just go right onto the fill-in and begin the retouching. And I use a synthetic resin-based paint, not an oil paint, because the binder, the resin in this case, can be reconstituted. I can mix it with solvent and it will become soluble again, allowing me to remove this retouching if ever I need. Now that's the really big difference between oil paint and conservation retouching paint, so that oil paint becomes permanent as it dries and oxidizes and crosslinks. And for many, many years, historically, that's all there was. People used oil paint. The problem is that over time, the oil in the oil paint changes. Sometimes it can darken, sometimes it can have a color shift, and then that retouching that looked really good now doesn't look so good. But unfortunately, because it's oil paint, it's really difficult to remove. This paint can be wiped off in a matter of seconds, and that means that whomever comes after me in this painting's life, caring for it, if they have to remove this, it will be very easy. I will document what I use on the back of the painting and in the report to the client so that there's no mystery. And if it ever needs to come off, well, hopefully the next conservator who does wipe it off in 15 seconds will have a little bit easier of a time than often I do. Now, sometimes retouching small pieces is deceptively hard. This doesn't look all that complicated. It's small, it's not a lot of retouching, but as you can see, as I put the color down, it changes as it dries, and I have to come back and modify it a little bit. Maybe lighten it up, maybe make it a little bit cooler or a little bit warmer. But this is how retouching goes, making a pass, letting it dry, seeing how it looks, making another pass. Do it again, and again, and again, and again, until you've gotten it just right. Now, on a little painting like this, where the retouching isn't a lot, it's not going to take me very long. This maybe took 20 minutes to do all of this retouching. On a big painting, it can take days or weeks. And on a painting that has complex glazes or layering or mixed media or just isn't a straight painting, well, then it can get really, really complicated. But here, I'm really lucky, not only because it's relatively small, but because this damage happened right in a really busy spot of the painting, right on this windmill. So there's a lot of content that can distract the eye. Now, once my eye is satisfactorily distracted and I no longer can see the area that I was retouching, it's ready for varnish. And for that, I head into the back room. Now, even though this painting didn't have a varnish on it, that doesn't mean that it shouldn't have a varnish, that it won't benefit from a varnish. This artist may not have varnished it for any number of reasons, but we can varnish it, and we can make sure that the painting, A, looks really good. Varnish makes paintings look really good, but it also protects the paintings. It protects them from grime, dust, dirt, from incidents, and from ultraviolet light, just ambient sunlight that might otherwise harm the painting. This is also synthetic, and it is completely reversible, so if it ever does need to come off, again, I have made the next conservator's life that much easier. I'm paying it forward, carrying their water, so to speak. And even though this painting did not require a Herculean effort of conservation, The work was relatively simple and straightforward. It has made a huge difference, not only in what we see, the colors that were completely obscured by that heavy layer of soot and grime, the whole which just captured our attention and made it impossible to see the story, but the story itself, what William Beck was trying to convey, what he was telling us about what was happening with this woman and her life. The paint is clean, the colors are visible, and it now glitters with the application of a new synthetic ultraviolet stable varnish, which won't discolor or yellow in the future. The hole has been repaired so that we don't even know that it existed, allowing us to see the image as the artist intended. And all of the little structural work, the strip lining on the top and bottom edge, the reinforcement on the left and right, the reweaving of the canvas, the keys, the fishing line, all of this will go a long way to making sure that structurally this painting is sound and will last for another 100 years, enabling the next round of viewers to appreciate what the artist was intending us to see, not all of the flaws of age and deterioration that so often plague paintings. And so while she is doing the hard work of carrying the water, and William Beck is carrying the load of telling her story, giving her a life, I did the heavy work of making sure that William Beck's work could be appreciated, and that her story could be told. And as we take a look back at the painting as it arrived in my studio, well, it actually was in bad condition and needed a ton of labor. But all of that, well, it was a weight I was happy to carry for the artist, for the subject, and for the viewer.